can everybody hear me on the far end? As Marvin said, my name is Mark Hyden, and I'm the National Advocacy Coordinator for Conservatives concerned about the death penalty. We are a national network of conservatives and some libertarians who simply believe the death penalty is inconsistent with our core principles. Now, I started doing this work after a stint, as he said, in the National Rifle Association. I managed GOP campaigns, and as I serve as a Republican legislative aide in the state of Georgia. And the reason that I enumerate my background is that you know that conservatism is very close to my heart. But for a long time, I accepted the death penalty as just another part of conservatism. But I started to re-examine the facts and look at the death penalty for what it is, which is essentially a big broken government program. So I started to change my view. But I want to hammer on a couple points before I jump directly into this. I'm a pro-life conservative. I believe in fiscal responsibility, limited government, and good government programs that actually accomplish something. So with that being known, here's some indisputable facts about the death penalty. It repeatedly risks innocent lives, costs more than life without parole. There is no evidence to suggest that it deters crime, and many murder victims' family members find this to be a much more harmful process than life without parole.
Can you possibly move over that direction so we can see your wonderful graphic? That would be great.
Sure. So keep these facts in mind, because I want, as you go through this, or as I go through this presentation, I want you to keep a couple questions in your head. So if anybody here supports the death penalty, now you know that it risks innocent lives. So ask yourself, if you want this program in place, what's the number? How many innocent lives are you also willing to kill in order to get the guilty ones? Because that's what it comes down to. And how much money are you willing to spend on a program that's been proven pretty much to not accomplish any goals, or at least the goals that we are told that it's supposed to support? So you don't have to take it from me. I'm going to go through a few names here, and I hope you guys know this. Do you know who Jay Sekulow is?
Yes.
Okay. I do a lot of speaking at colleges, and some of these kids, they don't know who these people are. Scathing indictment on our educational system. Well, Jay was one of our first supporters, and he opposed it because it lessens the possibility of redemption, risks innocent lives, and costs a ton of money. How about this guy? Oliver North. I'm sure there's some strong feelings about this man. But I gotta tell you, I know him personally, and he's really cool. First time I met him was in the green room at Ccadp. I arranged a meeting. I pulled out all the favors I could get to meet him. And I'm sitting there waiting, a little nervous, because he's a big deal. And he walks in, chest out, back erect, like you'd expect to see a colonel marching. And he walks up to me, and he flips a chair backwards and he sits down. He's got these piercing blue eyes. And he sits down and he stares at me for a considerable amount of time. And he goes, "Mark, I've killed an awful lot of people." And at that moment, I was like, this is not a good start to this meeting. But then he went on, he says, "But the death penalty is unnecessary and it's dangerous in the hands of our government." And I happen to agree with him. How about this guy?
Yeah, we all know him.
Okay, good. Well, he was, he endorsed this a couple years ago. We felt privileged to have his support. He simply said the death penalty is completely inconsistent with traditional conservatism as well as libertarianism, and I happen to agree with him. So back to my story, because I've talked about theirs. I used to support the death penalty, but it was a journey for me. I'm a pro-life advocate, like I said in the beginning. But I had a hard time justifying the death penalty once I realized that over 155 people have been wrongly convicted and sentenced to die. And we have a couple people in here right now who were wrongly convicted and sentenced to die. We're very lucky, very fortunate to have them, because this is a government program that obviously makes many mistakes.
I'm sorry, you got to clarify. In Oklahoma or in our room now?
Nationally, the number is at 156. In Oklahoma, it's 10.
We had 2 people in the room right now.
Oh, there's two in our room today.
Okay, that's what it was.
Okay. Sorry about that. So here's a couple stories. This is Anthony Greggs. Anthony's a great guy. If you get a chance to hear him speak, please do. He's a motivational speaker, and he tells a great story. He was convicted of a really gruesome crime, killing a family of 6. It was a terrible crime, and They wanted justice, but they didn't get justice because they convicted him. Essentially what happened in his case is the prosecutor had a confession from the real killer. But the prosecutor, obviously, for whatever reason, did not want to enter that into evidence. So she proceeded to try to get a guilty verdict on Anthony and sentence him to die, and she was successful. So he languished in prison for around, I think, about 18 years before a new prosecutor came in and they found this admission of guilt. And they're like, good Lord, we've got to get this guy out of jail. But, you might think this is the exception, but unfortunately prosecutorial misconduct like this happens far too often. Here's a different guy. This is Carlos Delima. Most people haven't heard of him, and I wish they had. He was convicted and executed for allegedly killing a gas station attendant in 1983. His case was based solely on circumstantial evidence and the eyewitness testimony of one guy. One guy who said he was 50% sure that he was the perpetrator. 50%. But it gets worse. There was another man, also named Carlos, going around town bragging about how he got away with murder and pinned it on this Carlos. The guy that was doing the bragging just so happened to be a protected police informant. So it doesn't take much to have a conspiracy theory or two come out of this. But my point is that mistaken eyewitness testimony has led to wrongful convictions and has led to wrongful executions. It happens far too often. Now, it's usually at this point when I'm doing presentations that I see little hand raised up and say, well, that was 1983. We live in 2016. We have forensic science. We have DNA. We have all sorts of neat technology. Does anybody here watch the CSI television shows? Yeah, they're fun, but there's no truth. That might as well be fantasy. DNA evidence is pretty rare. It's only found in up to 10% of all criminal cases, and we're finding other forms of forensic evidence is practically unscientific and may have led to some disastrous consequences. And I'll give you a few examples. There's a lady by the name of Annie Dugan. She's serving 3 to 5 years in prison right now because she was a U.S. lab chemist who decided to falsify forensic data. In at least 349 cases, that's how many people have been released from prison for various crimes. But it could have been as much into the thousands. So it only takes one bad actor. Or you can look at what the FBI found. They started looking at hair analysis. And you guys may have heard about this. It was a pretty big deal. What they would do is they would find a hair at the scene of the crime, pluck a hair from the head of the alleged offender, put it under a microscope and say, it looks similar. He must be guilty. Let's execute this guy. Now, obviously, that's not what the experts said, but at least not the second half of that statement. But essentially, that's how it worked. If it looks similar, they must be guilty. Well, the FBI started looking back and just to see how accurate they were. They were horrified at what they found. They were so horrified that they canceled their study because the findings were that bad. Until eventually, finally, they were forced to finish it and release it. And they found that they had overstated their certainty on this hair analysis in at least 2,000 cases and 27 capital cases. And I believe 14 of those individuals are already dead. Now I'm going to take you a little bit closer to home. This is Curtis McCarty. He was convicted and sentenced to die here in Oklahoma. Now his case was a mess. He clearly was not guilty, but he was sentenced to die because of prosecutorial misconduct and the false testimony, essentially, of a disgraced forensic so-called expert that you used to have here in Oklahoma by the name of Joyce Gilchrist. She said, she looked at his hair strands and compared it to the scene of the crime. She goes, these don't match. She even wrote that down. But then I guess she had a conversation with the prosecution, and they thought Curtis would be a good guy to sentence to death. So she forged her own notes to say that, no, I didn't say that they didn't match. I actually meant to say that they do match. And then somehow she or one of her co-workers destroyed the hairs, so the defense couldn't do any DNA testing. So we languished on death row for a very long time until finally, by luck, essentially, DNA evidence was found that exonerated him. He's since been released. Now, up until Curtis, most of what I told you about was from other states, not Oklahoma. But I promise you, Oklahoma's death penalty is just as bad as any other state, and actually perhaps it's probably in the top 3 worst. So I'm sorry to break this bad news to you guys. You've executed 112 inmates and wrongly convicted and released 10 since the death penalty was reinstated. So you don't have to be a statistician to know 112 executions and 10 wrongful convictions is a pretty scary record. The risk of killing an innocent person is real, especially here in Oklahoma. Like,
Are those 10 who were executed?
those were released. We don't know how many innocent people might have been executed because there's no method in the criminal justice system to go back and try a dead guy, which is essentially what we have. But there's a lot of cases nationally where it looks like there's strong evidence supporting their claims of innocence. But even when you are executing people, or executing the wrong ones, Oklahoma has a problem carrying out executions. You botched several here. I say you, like you guys were involved. I'm sure the guy in the Ron Paul shirt wasn't involved. But
I wasn't executed.
like, oh, okay, this is awkward. And so it got so bad. I don't know if you guys followed the multi-county grand jury report, where they came out and they admitted that they executed Warner using not the lethal injection drug. They used a chemical used to de-ice runways by mistake. They got the wrong drug. Nobody checked. They didn't properly store it. They didn't properly look at it. The doctor didn't notice when he approved it, and the IV team didn't bother to look at the name on the vial before injecting it. So clearly that execution went awry. Then they tried to execute Richard Blossom, a man who may very well be innocent, who's on your death row now. And that case bothers me very much. And they're preparing to execute him when finally someone noticed, this is not the death penalty drug. This is what they used to get ice off of airport runways. Governor's General Counsel said, it'll still kill him. Google it. That's his quote. Google it. So we're dictating execution protocols by Google. Thankfully, the AG actually stepped in and said, dude, for real, you can't do this. So they halted it, but it revealed widespread malfeasance throughout the death penalty system. So that brings us to State Question 776, which you guys are going to have on your ballot. It seeks to make the death penalty, put it into the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, because the death penalty obviously is a right. I don't really understand it. But it seeks to make sure that it can't be viewed as cruel and unusual punishment. Now, I'm sure everyone here knows Civics 101, the separation of powers. And what that's doing, it's actually circumventing the judicial branch, because they're the ones that decide what is cruel and unusual. And this also aims to make more options for executing people in case they're ever found to be unconstitutional. So, firing squads, nitrogen gas, who knows, maybe drawing and quartering could be in the near future, I hope not. But that would be possible if it's not deemed unconstitutional. So what is this going to do for Oklahoma? If it's passed, it's going to be super expensive. It gives another way for litigation. So this could cost in the millions of dollars, and it will not make the death penalty more efficient, it won't make it easier, it won't help at all. It's just a fiscal boondoggle. That's what you've got going on right now in Oklahoma. So I'm going to skip over to cost. Now, like I said, I'm pro-life. But if you're pro-life, the way the death penalty is run should be rather offensive. It should also be offensive how expensive the death penalty is for fiscal conservatives. Now, there's been close to 24 studies that all show the same thing. The death penalty costs much more than life without parole. It's even led to tax increases. So it's more expensive because the initial trial is many times longer than comparable trials. There's more motions, more witnesses, more attorneys, and so forth. Then there's an additional trial that's unique to capital cases, and it exists just to see if the offender can receive a death sentence. Then beyond that, you have the much maligned appeals process, which everybody likes to harp on, but there's 2 examples in the room right now of why we have an appeals process. It's taken more than 30 years. They're housed on death row, which according to a recent study, that's about twice as expensive as housing in a maximum security prison. So I've read these studies, I've seen how costly it is. I'm sure I'm not the smartest guy in the room, so I actually had to try to figure out how to quantify some of these big numbers. It reminded me at the time I met Stacey Rector. She runs the Tennessee group against the death penalty. We've since become friends. And she told me about how she did an open records request. Has anybody here done this? open records request, really easy stuff to do. Although they can force you to pay printing costs. And that's what happened with Stacy. He said they gave her an enormous number. She said, I can't afford the printing costs. She works for a nonprofit because the transcripts and files from this single capital case was over 115,000 pages long. I don't know what 115,000 anything looks like, so I had to pull out a calculator. So if you print it out on 20-pound copy paper like we all use, and you stack up 115,000 pages, that would be a book that's 38 feet thick. It's more than 6 times as tall as I'm.
25 cents a copy.
It's a lot of money. Now, I don't know if you've read Atlas Shrugged or the Bible, but that makes those look like a casual afternoon read. So, but you can look at what other counties have done. Jasper County, Texas raised their property taxes by 7% to pay for one capital case. Clallam County, they had to lay out 15% of the workforce to retry a death row inmate. Lincoln County, Georgia, and Martin, you may appreciate this with your commission work, they raised taxes multiple times to the point that it got out of hand. So the county commission said, we're not going to pay any more on this. They went before the judge rather brazenly and said, we're done. We're not paying anymore. The judge thought that was really cute, and he threw the whole county commission in jail. So from jail, they had to have a special meeting of the county commission to approve appropriations so that they could be released. And in Richardson County, that's probably my favorite story. They tried to try 2 people in hopes of getting a guilty verdict and then an execution. It was a capital case, but they ran out of money. They were approaching bankruptcy. So they brought the most brilliant minds in Richardson County, Nebraska together to come up with a foolproof plan to execute these men. Best idea they could come up with was, let's mortgage all of our ambulances. They're not that important. So that's the route they went. But those 2 people were never executed. So all of that was a huge waste. So the next questions I usually get is, how expensive is the death penalty? And I'm not going to sit here, I'm not going to give you the exact number because I'd be lying to you. There's no line item budget for the death penalty. Every state pays for it differently. The costs are carried on the state, local, and federal levels, and even then there are over numerous agencies. But I can tell you that close to 24 studies have all come to the same conclusion. It costs a boatload of money. California, obviously not known as a bastion of conservatism, they've supposedly spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 billion with a B, and they've executed 13 people. You can do some math there. It's not good if you're a fiscal conservative. It's really costly there. But it's not just California. Maryland, when they had the death penalty, they found that each execution was about $2 million more than a life without parole proceeding. North Carolina also found that per execution it was about $2 million more than the whole life cycle of life without parole. This should be pretty offensive to fiscal conservatives, and it should be even more offensive to elected officials who are supposed to act as stewards of the taxpayers' hard-earned money. But you know, it's conservatives, libertarians that know better than anyone, that in an age of annual deficits and ballooning public debt, there are no sacred cows, especially when you're talking about broken government programs that really achieve no real goals. But that's not lost on a lot of states. Governor Scott in Florida was like, yeah, it is pretty expensive. So they passed Florida's Timely Justice Act, and it's supposed to shorten the appeals process and make it cheaper. But listen, I'm a conservative, so when I heard timely justice, shorter, cheaper, I was like, this sounds like my kind of program. Does anybody here know Congressman Nancy? Or no? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Great guy. I was listening to him one day, and he said if you want to know what a bill does, look at the title of it. And he looked at the direct opposite. And the same can be said about Florida's Timely Justice Act. It's supposed to make the death penalty cheaper, but actually fails to address the most costly portion of a capital proceeding, which are the trials. Now, it may lead to some modest cost savings by shortening the appeals process, but that is a lifeline. It's a lifeline for 2 people in this room. It's a lifeline for 154 others, at least. When you shorten that, you virtually guarantee that innocent people will be executed by the state. Here's my case. This is Juan Melendez. He was convicted of murder also in Florida. That's why I bring him up. But they found out in his case that there's pretty bad prosecutorial misconduct. He's Got a nice Witness to Innocence shirt. I'm glad I pulled that picture off for you guys. But by chance, even though there was all this prosecutorial misconduct, someone, dumb luck, again, by chance ran across the transcript where the guy had actually, the real killer, had admitted to the crime years ago. For whatever reason, the prosecution didn't want to have any evidence. So they found that and they released him, but it was after 17 years being on death row. Had the Timely Justice Act been implemented in Juan's day, this man would probably be dead. Now, and that would be quite wrong. Consider that murder, consider whatever you'd like. But that should be very problematic. I speak at a lot of colleges. You guys know who this is, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's been a couple times at some unnamed colleges, obviously not in Oklahoma, where a few people, I believe, were wondering who this old lady was. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go back to our forefathers, like Benjamin Franklin and like James Madison, who both opposed the death penalty. Limited government has always been a central tenet of Americanism, as well as conservatism and libertarianism. But let's be honest. Is there anything limited about a government program that empowers the government to kill you? I can't think of a greater government program than that. That is the greatest power I can think of. But is it wise? This is the same government that had problems launching a healthcare website, has problems delivering mail, filling potholes, runs the DMV. So if you want the death penalty run like the DMV, run like the healthcare website, then this might be a good thing for you. But I think for conservatives, the trust is not there. It's definitely not there for libertarians. Clearly, you don't want to run with the same efficacy and efficiency as many of these programs. I told you in the beginning, I supported the death penalty, or I used to support the death penalty. And I concocted, I'm kind of ashamed to say I concocted this argument. I knew it wasn't pro-life if it risked innocent life. I knew it wasn't fiscally responsible if it cost more than life without parole and even led to tax increases, which is a cardinal conservative sin. And I knew it wasn't representative of a limited government. But I said if more lives are saved because of the deterrent effect with the death penalty than wrongly executed by the state, then I can consider this a worthwhile government program. First of all, that's a utilitarian argument that ignores individual rights and liberties of Americans, and that doesn't belong in libertarianism or conservatism. But then I found all these studies that showed that there's no evidence to suggest that the death penalty does deter. If you look at the states that are the perennial leaders in executions, places like Texas, they don't have the lowest murder rates. They're not even remotely close. Then you can look at many states that have repealed capital punishment. When they repeal it, oftentimes their murder rates go down. I'm not saying that having the death penalty on the books causes murder. I'm saying there's just no causal relationship between the two. For every 100 murders, one of those results in a death sentence. Fewer than that one are ever executed, and that happens 10, 20, 30 years later. That does not run through anybody's head when they're acting in passion or if they have some sort of psychological problem. That calculation just doesn't exist. So after I turned against the death penalty, I started working with some amazing and very inspirational people, murder victims' family members, and many of them I'm proud to call friends now. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every single one that I met is against the death penalty, because that just wouldn't be true. What I can tell you is every single one that I've ever met says the way the death penalty is run utterly fails them. It fails them because in the beginning, prosecutors love to make these big, bold promises. I will secure an execution. Well, 68% of death sentences are overturned on appeal, so that might as well be a lie when a prosecutor says that. Then these individuals are re-traumatized through a decades-long process of trials, retrials, appeals, and incessant media attention, whereby they relive the worst moments of their lives, publicly and repeatedly. I'm not saying you can get closure from having a family member murdered, but you certainly can't get anywhere near closure when you have a system that's running like that. But in the end, if they are executed, the offender turns into a household name, a quasi-celebrity, and the victim is generally forgotten. I think there's something unjust about a system that does that. And I can tell you, I was talking with Abe Bonowitz in the back over there about a nice lady in Florida And she was speaking at a conference in Indianapolis, and I was speaking there as well. It was a Journey of Hope. And she told a story about how her father was a minister, and he was against the death penalty very vocally. And he had told his daughter this, that he would never want, even if he were to be murdered, he would never want the offender to receive a death sentence. And very regrettably, very unfortunately, this poor man was murdered. And my heart goes out to his daughter. But the story gets even more bizarre. She was subpoenaed to testify in trial. This is a lady who deserves justice. She wanted justice, and rightfully so. But she was threatened. The state threatened her, not the criminal defense attorney, not the offender. The state threatened her. They said, if you say you're against the death penalty, we're going to have to hold you in contempt of court and throw you in jail. Again, if people tell you the death penalty is there for murder victims' family members, think twice. Essentially, but not all murder victims' family members are put through this, thankfully, and not all because not all people who commit murders are executed. So who gets executed, guys? Is it the worst of the worst? We know who these people are, right? Yes. Well, the current system has executed men like Carlos Deluna, who may have been innocent, while people like Jeffrey Dahmer and Charles Manson are not executed. I can say with all clarity and sincerity that I really don't care where anyone stands on the death penalty. A system that does that, we can all agree, it's not working properly. Essentially, what the death penalty is, it's a lottery geography. You can commit 2 identical murders in 2 adjacent counties and receive 2 different sentences. One of life without parole, one of death, because most counties don't use the death penalty. They simply can't afford it. In fact, it's only 2% of all U.S. counties that account for the majority of all death sentences in the United States. This uneven and arbitrary use of capital punishment, it really offers no real reason why some people are executed and others are not. So I've been sitting here giving you a lot of bad news, telling you how bad the death penalty is, but I got some good news. And this map is outdated. There's a lot of stuff that's happened, but 19-ish states don't have the death penalty right now. So I'll say that Delaware had this Supreme Court decision, which makes it look like they don't have the death penalty anymore. And right now, Nebraska's going through a referendum issue with the death penalty, but more and more states are getting rid of it, and for good reason. No matter how much they like it in theory, they found in practice, it just doesn't work properly. So that being known, it shouldn't surprise you that executions are at a 20-year low. Death sentences are at a 40-year low. Support for capital punishment is near a 40-year low. And this poll just came out, I don't know, 3 weeks ago or something. What is that date? No, it was
2 years ago.
Yeah. Sooner poll.
The Sooner poll.
Yeah. Earlier this year. Well, they found that 53% of Oklahomans support repealing and replacing the death penalty with a system of life without parole, whereby the offender works to pay restitution to the victim's families. That sounds like a pretty reasonable approach, and the plurality of Republicans also support this. So there's a growing disgust with the death penalty, and that's my point. Now, I tell you, it'd be kind of rude to have a guy from Georgia, me, come to your state, come to your club, and tell you how bad one of your government programs is without at least giving you an idea on how to rectify it. I only have one answer. The death penalty is irreparably broken. The government's not perfect and never will be. I really think the only way to fix this is to repeal it. Now, I, just like all conservatives, I want to hold offenders accountable without not being soft on them. Because I think there has to be personal responsibility for actions, and justice must be implemented for the order of society. But it's important to remember here, we can still maintain our support for strict or even rigid justice if that's what you're into. But we have to be smart on crime too. We can't continue to support the death penalty when it's run so poorly. It risks innocent lives. It costs more than life without parole. It doesn't deter crime. And it gives a government a power that it neither deserves nor should be trusted with. So whether any of you support the death penalty in theory or even biblically, I think we can agree our government does not run this program well, or up to theoretical, or up to biblical standards. Never has and it never will, because there is no such thing as a perfect government program. And if you guys can point out a government program that's perfect, I'll go back to Georgia right now. No? But that's what's needed. Because when the government kills an innocent U.S. citizen, it becomes no better than the offenders that it's trying to execute. So in the beginning, I asked you a couple questions for you to keep in your head. And I want you to revisit those. If you want the death penalty, what kind of collateral damage is acceptable? If you want to kill the worst of the worst, you have to have a program in place. Inevitably, that means innocent lives will get caught up in that. So what is the number? And what's the financial number? If you want it in place, how much money, beyond the cost of life without parole, are you willing to spend on a program that doesn't deter crime and harms victims' family members and risks innocent lives? It's a lot of money, so we need to have a number that we want. And lastly, as you grapple with whether you support the death penalty, this is the most important question. Don't ask yourself, do some people deserve to die? That'll take you down the wrong path. It's a theoretical question. Ask yourself, do you trust an error-prone government to fairly, efficiently, and properly administer the death penalty program? And if you even hesitate to answer that, then the answer, it's a resounding no. So I appreciate you letting me run through this. I tried to speed it up a little bit because we've got a speaker that is much more interesting than me. Randy, would you like to come up and introduce yourself? And we can handle questions after Kwame talk real briefly.
And thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark.
It's a very good program. Very well laid out. Well, thank you everyone for inviting me to a nice dinner and good people. And I have the distinction of being two things. First off, I'm a death row exoneree from Illinois. I spent 18 years in prison, 12 of which was on death row for a crime I didn't commit. And having been put through a system that I didn't think had ever happened, because I came from a very conservative area in Paris, Illinois, east of Chicago. My granddad was a deputy sheriff, and my brother was an Illinois state trooper. So I found myself 28 years ago being led out of the courtroom to Pontiac Death Row in Illinois. So to try to wrap your head around that, you know, we come from a family that believed in the death penalty. You know, you watch people march across the TV screen, they look guilty, and that's how we were raised. But little did we know that you cannot trust government all the time, because there's rogue police officers, there's rogue prosecutors, and ineffective defense lawyers who think they can handle a death penalty case. And I was wrongly convicted in June of 1987 of a brutal murder of a young newlywed couple, Dyke and Karen Rhodes. And Dyke and Karen Rhodes were just starting out in life, had been recently married. Karen worked for a businessman in the town that had gotten extremely wealthy overnight, making dog food ingredients. And on July 9th, 1987, or excuse me, July 6th weekend, 1986, there was a brutal murder. And 3 days later, we were pulled out of a public place, my co-defendant and myself, and questioned by the police. And I thought it was strange, because you know how bars are anyway, they're rumor mills. Well, we had 5 cops come in and say, we want to talk to you. I got that rumor mill really buzzing in that little town. And you know, I cooperated with the police, gave them my step-by-step whereabouts, my alibi. And so did my co-defendant, and we were released. 7 months later, there was a knock on my door. And 5 police officers come in, handcuffed me, and pointing .45s at me with their hands shaking like this, put leg irons on me, took me downtown, put me in a holding cell. 5 minutes later, my little brother walked in. He had just been on the Illinois State Police for about 2 years. He was a rookie patrolman. And he came in and he pulled up a chair and sat down next to me and he says, listen, I talked to the prosecutor, I talked to the 2 lead detectives, and they said if you will cooperate and confess, they won't seek the death penalty. And I'm not going to repeat my exact words to him that night in that jail cell, it wouldn't be appropriate, but as I was yelling at him and reaching for him, he slammed me, aren't guilty. Now, can you imagine your own brother telling you something like that? I mean, that's how law and order my family was. They believed you had to have something to do with it. So I told him to get me an attorney. You know, I was naive to what kind of attorney I needed. Didn't have any money. I had about $35,000 that I borrowed. And I got an expert DUI lawyer to handle my capital case. He'd handle the DUI on a Monday and maybe real estate on a Wednesday, and Friday he'd handle a criminal case. Because back there was no standards or statutes that you had to have for capital defense. And I got a speedy trial. You know, the state used a mentally ill woman and a town drunk. They said that they were both eyewitnesses to the crime. Both pointed me out at the trial and said they're the ones that did it. And I can't explain to you the feeling I had other than it was like sitting on a bed of hot coals and you can't scream out and somebody's pointing at you that you did something and you know you didn't. Because I had a corroborated alibi. Remains corroborated this very day. So I put on my alibi witnesses. The state put on these two drug addicts and drunks, and they didn't pay attention. They said, well, he was hanging out with his friends that day. They're his friends. He went to school with them. Well, yeah, I was hanging out with people that knew me. Even people in the peripheral witnesses that they used in my trial said, I know where he was at. And I don't particularly like that guy, but I know where he was at on that particular night. What better witness could you have than somebody that doesn't really like you? So I had hope that, you know, there's no physical evidence, forensic evidence tied to this crime. I got a corroborated alibi. I spent 2 hours on the witness stand, batting back and forth with that prosecutor, denying everything. And I felt good. On the fourth day, they charged the jury, and they went out to deliberate for 6 hours. I got my family sitting in the courtroom, my mom, my children, my dad, my aunts, my uncles, my brother, my sister-in-law. And I was waiting for that verdict to come back in, and they called me and took me back to the courtroom, and I watched those 12 jurors walk in, and I'm looking to see if they would look at me. And they were all looking at the tops of their shoes, walking into the jury box. So I had a sinking feeling right then and there, I'm about to receive some of the worst news I ever had in my life. And it felt like an eternity to get that verdict form from the judge and back to the foreman of the jury. But I was searching for 2 words, not guilty. And all I heard was one word. And it still didn't hit me until I looked at my lawyer and his face kind of drained, and I heard my mom wailing behind me. And then everything got real quiet. My own attorney didn't even know that sentencing was going to begin the very first day the next morning in front of this jury. He thought he had 2 weeks. No, Mr. Mueller, it begins in the morning. He had no preparation in case I was convicted to avoid a death penalty. No legwork at all in any kind of investigation. Next morning I come back in. They put people up on my stand, you know, my mother, family members. But I wouldn't get up there. I told them, I'm not getting up there in front of him again. I'm begging for my life for something I didn't do. And so the jury went out after 10 minutes, and it was about 15 minutes, and here they come back. The death penalty. And again, I heard my mom cry. Her hands were buried in her face. You know, but still, it was like you're not even there. It's like you're watching this happen. And you can't believe it. It's like when they said guilty and they said death penalty, it's like they reached over and turned the light switch off on your life at that very moment. But I was still hopeful when I went to death row. I went from my home to death row in 97 days. That's unheard of today.
Wow.
And I started my appeals, my direct appeals, which we were all guaranteed. It took 4 years to get through that process because both of these 2 eyewitnesses, the only evidence they had against me, had recanted their testimony. So I had to have another hearing. They came back before a different judge, reaffirmed their trial testimony because the police and the prosecutor leaned on it. Turned around and sent me back to death row, and I had to start a post-conviction process at that time because he denied my direct appeal. Any actual evidence claims. That took me an additional 8 years before I got another hearing. My mother cleaned houses to try to get money for an expert witness. She cleaned houses after my second execution date to buy a plot. No mom should have to do that. But luckily, we had some expert witnesses that came forward, donated their time, debunked the crime scene. These two witnesses of which were in this crime scene room, in this house. They never saw each other there. That was an impossibility. The fire that was set supposedly charred the inside of the lamp. The lamp was bone white on the inside. Everything else was covered in soot. That proved that one of their witnesses didn't see a broken lamp. The knife they introduced as the murder weapon wasn't long enough, wasn't thick enough, and wasn't the right type of knife to cause the fatal wounds on these two people. All this I put before another evidentiary hearing in front of a different judge. It lasted 21 days. My trial didn't last a third that long. After 3 months, that was denied, and I went back to death row. But I filed an ineffective claim at sentencing also, and finally the Illinois Supreme Court realized the fact he never put on any kind of meaningful mitigation that he was ineffective at sentencing. So they gave me life without parole after 12 years. So I got one appeal left. I'm going to federal court with my federal aid. I'm figuring I'm going to die in prison one way or the other, either passive death sentence or I'm going to be free. But I only got one shot. And about this same time, the Illinois State Police were getting a little nervous that there was too many questions being asked about the investigation. So they brought in an investigator from the state police, gave him 3 weeks to review the case, and they wanted a report on their desk. Well, before he could even open up the page, the book, or the file, they saw where here's the real detectives, the original detectives, were calling him up saying, don't make us look bad now in your investigation. So I sent up a first red flag to Lieutenant Callahan. He said, that's not normal. He said, Randy, he told me years later, I might have made a mistake on a license plate or a color of a car, but never anything that I'd worry about somebody looking over my shoulder reviewing my work. So when you got 3 detectives that called me on the same day, I knew they were hiding something. And when they got into the file, they saw where Debbie Reinbold had charges pending on her, Darrell Harrington had charges pending on him, and they were chasing a $25,000 reward offered by Karen Rhodes' employer, the first original suspect in the case, because a week before Karen was murdered, she went out to the parking lot to deliver her boss a message, and he's loading machine guns and cash in the car, and he berated her over being out there. And he knew she wouldn't keep her mouth shut. And it was organized crime, Gambino crime family, the Sicilian pizza connection back in those days. John Gotti ran the big empire. But all of that was way above Paris, Illinois. And this man that she worked for has become extremely wealthy over the years. He made tens of thousands of campaign donations, all the way up through the state offices and all the way to the governor's office. Finally, the Illinois State Police told Lieutenant Callahan, you're to cease and desist. We don't want you investigating any further. If you hear anything else, I want you to report back to us. And he said, what are you talking about? You gave me a blank check to start a full-blown investigation on Bob Morgan. He said, listen, this case is too politically sensitive and this comes from the top. Well, he sat back and looked at that command of his superiors and said, since when is murder too politically sensitive? I'm trying to free 2 innocent men. I'm trying to give closure to the victim's family members and leading you to the real killer. The state police didn't want to hear it. But where's the top when you get that high? The governor's office. And come to find out, he had made tens of thousands of dollars of campaign donations to George Ryan. So, along this time, my federal appeal is still languishing in federal court. And so this cop is bringing more evidence to amend it with. And I've been locked up almost 14 years, 15 years at this time, when finally I got a call one day, and they came down and got me, took me to the captain's office, and it was my attorneys. And that was the longest walk I'd ever taken to ask for an attorney phone call, because I knew this is probably from the federal court. And so when I got the phone, the first thing my attorney said, "Randy, are you sitting down?" And I said, "Yeah." Sat down immediately. And she said, "I want you to know that Judge McCuskey had overturned your conviction and granted all 17 issues of your federal habeas corpus." And I'm acting like, "Will you repeat that, please?" And she repeated it, and I had the captain of the guard look at me, and I had tears running down my eyes. He thought it was bad news. And I get choked up thinking about it today at that moment. When he looked at me and I hung the fork back to him, he said, real sympathy, you know. I said, "No," I said, "it's good news." And so I'll tell you what, I was a happy man. But I didn't get out like that. It was almost another year while the Attorney General was overseeing it and reinvestigating the case again and pulling in one of the witnesses who said the police told her about the lamp and the crime scene. So then she refused to appeal that judge's order and went back to the appellate court. My 120-day clock started ticking. And they had no choice. 120 days, May 28, 2004, after 18 years in prison, I walked out of prison. But still without that cloud still hanging over your head. They were still threatening to retry me on the testimony of a drunk and a mentally ill woman. Because it was a big empire they were protecting. Herb Whitlock, Randy Steigel, they were just a couple of patsies. But if it hadn't been for the efforts of Mike Callahan, an honest state cop who risked his pension, his job, and everything to fly under the radar, they even had their foot on my little brother's neck all those years as he rose in rank in the Illinois State Police. They were telling me they didn't even want him to be a brother, let alone want to know what's going on with the case. That's the type of criminal empire Illinois was running back in those years. So I'm just here to say that without judicial review that I finally got from a real judge, I'd be dead today, or at the very least, languishing in prison. Only because of that last judicial review. And I really believe that Oklahoma's track record so far is not very pretty when you've got 10 people that's been exonerated, you've got 3 botched executions, and now you got a state question, 776, that they want to put in the state constitution to allow them to supersede any kind of judicial review for potential innocent people like me sitting on that Oklahoma's death row. And it's a redundant bill anyway. It's not going to do anything to change the death penalty. It's just going to make it easier to hide the state's mistakes from judicial review and cost millions of dollars more in litigation. So I want you to know that I'm here with my buddy Kwame, and he's also a board member. I'm chairman of the Witness to Innocence Board of Directors, and we're happy to be here. And we represent the innocents in this country, and it's 156 and counting.
Wow.
Of innocent, we're the lucky ones. We don't know who didn't have the Mike Callahans, the honest cops that would risk their life and their career for somebody they didn't even know. How many of those ones is fortunate? And that's why I say Oklahoma needs to put the brakes on the death penalty instead of putting the gas on it. So, thank you. I'm open for any questions. Anybody want to ask me something? Yeah.
So who's pushing for this? What's the point?
Well, I believe it's Representative Sykes and Christians pushing state question. Yeah.
What? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Because they have a firm belief that the death penalty is worth it?
Well, they have a lot of friends that are attorneys and realize it will be a stimulus package for them. Because there will be litigation that's going to raise your taxes.
So who makes money off of all of, who feeds off the death penalty process? Who feeds off of that?
Yeah.
But who does it? I mean, what industries, what kinds of people feed off of the death penalty industry?
Legislators.
Does anybody else have mayonnaise?
They want to make sure that they have in place, in the state constitution, the method and the means to be able to carry out an execution in case lethal injection or some other form is going to be ruled unconstitutional someday. They don't want any languishing. They want to be able to bring that death machine in and be able to kill somebody anywhere they want to.
So,
have you received some sort of monetary compensation from the state of Illinois?
No, it's not compensation. What they do is they force you to, after you finally get your freedom, they force you to a 1983 civil rights action claim against the state and the county and the city that did you wrong. And then another 8-year battle that they get to involve all their crony Chicago gangster lawyers and invite them in to share a $14 million pie worth of litigation. That's what the attorneys opposing me got in 8 years. $14 million, 22 lawyers split between them. So what I got was minuscule. And I don't like to call it compensation because you can't give me back a third of my life. You can't make me 35 years old again. You can't bring my mom back from the grave. No. It's damages. That's the only thing. You can force them to pay damages, you might be lucky. Or if you have some absolute DNA evidence that clears you, you might get some kind of monetary damage. But they make you sue.
A lot of states actually require you to prove your own innocence before they're willing to reimburse you for anything.
Yeah.
Which is a flip on the criminal justice system that you have to prove your innocence.
And how do you prove a negative?
Yeah, exactly. So there's
When
one.
it was their system and they admitted, oops, after 18 years, and so how can you prove a negative?
Yep.
After you've been released? They wanted me to go take a lie detector test 6 months after I got out because they were pulling in a new grand jury. And I said, I remember 18 years ago when you would put me in that holding cell that I told you, I said, I'll take a lie detector test, you put me under sodium pentothal, give me anything you want and ask me anything you want. And I'm not hiding anything. And you people told me that was very self-serving 18 years ago. Well, I'm here today to tell you what you're asking me as a free man is pretty self-serving too. So I didn't get any more calls from the state investigator wanting to polygraph.
Did you reconcile with your brother?
I'm sorry.
How do you reconcile with your brother?
Oh yeah, I mean he became my staunchest supporter. When once the evidence and the curtain was drawn back and he saw what they were hiding all those years, he told me a year before he took his uniform off for the last time, he was ashamed of that uniform and couldn't wait to retire. Just because of some of the people within it.
Did your mom pass away while you were out?
I'm sorry.
Did your mom pass away?
She got real ill, and I got to spend about 4 years with her before she passed away. And she got real ill about 6 years before I got out. So, but anyway, thank you for having me here tonight. The next person I'd like you to hear from is my buddy Kwame. And he's another board of directors, and he's got another story that will tell you that will show you that, this is a pattern, folks. I mean, it's win at all costs. If they can circumvent the law with a state constitution, we're going to do it. Just to hold on to that almighty death penalty.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so guys, I come all the way from Cleveland, Ohio, to support you, voting no on this bill. I am Kwame Kamau Jones. I did 28 years of my young life in prison for a crime I didn't do. 3 years on death row, as well as my good friend, the co-defendants. May 19, 1975 was the day in question. Typical summer day, it was nice and hot. I remember playing ball that morning, went over to the school, checked in, came back, played ball that afternoon. That's what I did, was basketball. I was very athletic. My brother was 3 years older than me, he was 20. He had just gotten a new car when he was 4 years old. So he was 20 years old, had a car, 4 years old. He had that 71 Sebring. I don't know if you guys know. This is Starsky and Hutch car, okay? So he had it, it was black and white, and man, every day, that's all he did was rub this car. So this particular day, he was cleaning his car, me and Ricky was out playing ball when this incident happened. And what happened was a United States money order salesman by the name of Harold J. Franks, 61 years old, Caucasian male, was doing his regular rounds. And at the end of his round, which happened to be at the top of our street in our neighborhood, when he did his last pickup or drop off, whichever happened, he was robbed and murdered. The proprietor's wife of the store, Anna Robinson, looked out the window at the time and she was struck in the neck and in the jaw. So when that occurred, naturally the neighborhood, of course, we had never had anything like that in our neighborhood before. So the neighborhood was, there was a kid in my neighborhood, 12 years old, paper boy, real thin, pop out of glasses, everybody pushed him around, that didn't get attention. And so he went to the police and he said, you know, at the crowd, hey, I know who did it. And he named myself, he named my brother and my family. And so this was May 19th, the day of the murder. May 25th, I never forget, I lay sleeping and it's like 6:30 in the morning, Cleveland police kicked in my mom's door. I on the search warrant for my brother and my family. I figured he was there because Ricky stayed right down the street. Well, I was awakened. I didn't like what was going on because my mother was an old lady with a bad heart. So I got into a confrontation with the cops. They arrested me, took me to jail. But they didn't take me to adult court because in the interim they found out that I was a kid. They took me to juvenile. It would take 2 weeks and 1 day before they realized that I didn't have anything to do with it. And thus they created my portion of the story. Now, as the story goes, on this particular day that Mr. Frank was robbed, Ricky, my good friend, was allegedly the shooter. I, on the other hand, was supposedly leaning against the wall as Mr. Frank was in the store, drinking from this container of pop or whatever. But when Mr. Franks was robbed and killed, that same substance turned into acid that was thrown into his face. So we know now that human beings couldn't possibly have run that and then do it into the first place. Well, to go back to the kid, this is where the whole case lies. The kid put us in prison, and it would be the kid that would free us 40 years later. Okay? I have the distinct displeasure of being one of 3 people who have made history in the United States of America for having been incarcerated 39 years longer in this country. My brother and my best friend stayed in prison until November 20th, 2014. From 1975. My brother is now certified paranoid schizophrenic. He spent 29 years incarcerated. And what I mean by that is in solitary confinement. Being pumped with medications. He told me one time that they gave him side effect pills for the side effects, for the medications that they were given. And this atrocity is all too familiar in prison, and especially way back in the buyouts of the death row cells. Because we don't look back that far. Those guys and girls are sentenced to die. No one looks back there. So you don't see when their screams become agonizing so much to the point to they pulled out their cells and medicated. You miss hearing those gut-rending wails. I didn't miss it. I was only 18 the first time I heard it. And I still to this day, hear those sounds. Please don't take me from this cell. Please. So in 1975, when all this happened, and this kid made this statement, his mother told him, said, you know, that's not what's happening, you shouldn't do that. And so he tried at that time to recant, but they wouldn't allow him. Because I have to take you back to Cleveland. If you guys, and some of you have been around long as me, you know that Cleveland was a town that from the 60s through the 80s suffered a whole lot of social, very tough social turmoil. First with the riots, and then with the racial disparities that was going on the Lower East Side of Cleveland. So the police played a very big part in keeping what they call things in order. And what they did was what they did to me. You see, they would fabricate and just make up things, period. So this kid, he sought to recant his statement. But Detective Eugene Turpay, who was the lead detective on my case, wouldn't have it. And it would be later on in 2015 that we would find out that he had a history of doing this. But it was such a time that they just, you know, pat him on the wrist. Well, Detective Turpay told him, say, hey, so you're just a kid, and we can't do nothing to you. But your mom, we're gonna lock your mom up for every day that you don't say what you told us initially. The real reason what I just told you was so devastating to that young kid was because his mother was dying of ovarian cancer at that particular time. His mother was dying of ovarian cancer. And so that cop, with that kid in that room, and pushed him up against that wall and said, you're gonna say this, or we're gonna lock your mom up. I would be no difference. Throughout my whole trial, his parents was never with him. Never before has that happened, but at least to my knowledge, where a juvenile child can be escorted to court with the public, the police, and not his parents. The whole trial, this happened. So he came out of that interrogation room and he picked us out. That simple. And so we had 3 trials. My brothers being first, and they found him guilty, and they sentenced him to die. Mine was second, and they found me guilty, and they sentenced him to die. And then Rickus was last, and they found him guilty, and they sentenced him to die. Most importantly for you to realize is that they arrested me, they made a case on me, they tried me, they convicted me, and I was sentenced to die still at the tender age of 17. This happened in May 1975. My birthday is next month. I'll be 59 years old, October 20th. But I was sentenced to die in September. And it was just so long. Every law that they have said that they can't do that to juvenile. But they did it to me. I'm living proof that they did it to me. The numbers add up. 1975, 2016, 59, I will be. In the judicial process of my trial, there were so many legal atrocities. I say that because I didn't know then. Only thing I knew then was judge for the defense and Perry Mason. That's all I did, right? I didn't know nothing about real law. But I knew that Perry Mason would have stood up and rubbed his thigh on a whole lot of the things that my two advocates didn't say nothing about, right? When the judge stopped my trial and turned to the jury and said, hey, listen, so this guy is obviously ignorant. He don't know this. He can't explain that. Hell, you don't even know how many inches is in the foot. But when he tells you that this man did it, doesn't mean that he's lying, doesn't mean that he's wrong. And this is how I want you to see this case, as this man being a witness that is credible. Well, needless to say, when they went into deliberation and came back, Edward Vernon was telling the truth, and I was found guilty. Sentenced to die. So I entered the Ohio Penitentiary for men to be placed on death row. Still 17. Wait, next month I'm gonna turn 18. Maybe they'll move me to the adult cell, I don't know. Because I was so young, I didn't know that, that was the cell. But after time, you go to realize that you're in the cell 24 hours a day. 7 days a week, 364. Because they let you out one day for 1 hour walking down the range. Takes out 1 hour once a week. There's 80 cells in Ohio. There's 80 cells in the system. So they figure that if they let the inmate out, first cell, first day, for 1 hour, and they'll get 10 cells before a shift change. That's how they figured. They didn't care nothing about if we needed to stretch. They figured that they could work 10 cells before a shift change if they speeded up lunchtime. Okay. So I'm in this cell. I'm 18 years old now, and I'm hearing all kinds of stuff because you don't see nobody until they get that 1 hour, but you can hear everything. And as we play chess, I numbered 64 numbers on a chessboard or a chessboard. 64 numbers. 86. So if you move a number, a knight or bishop or whatever, 9 times out of 10 it's going to land on somebody's cell corresponding. And so this particular day, I had been there all of 7, 8 months maybe. Some guys upstairs was playing chess. And the one guy said, put my knight on 47, I'm sorry. And when he said the number 47, I was in J343, so 1, 2, 3 cells on the top of the range. Cell 47 was an old man from Cincinnati, Ohio, named Okrlc Collins. And he had been shot by the police like 6 times. He was out of his own death story. But he had the psychological thing going on, really, really, really bad. And when that man said that night on 47, he lost it. I lost it. Half the range lost it. Because never before have some of us heard those kind of gut-wrenching screams from a human being in real life who wasn't watching television. He screamed all of an hour. Please, God. Please, God. Auntie, my grandbaby's coming to see me. Well, I realized that too much trouble. And so I began to search my inner self because everybody I talked to had said what you'd heard some of the earlier statements was. Well, if you've been to court and found you guilty, I did it. Did it. 3 young guys, did it. but truly we do. And it has been my personal experience. And I tell you this with a heart that is pure as gold. When someone accuses you of something that you didn't do, you become defensive. But when someone accuses you and thus punishes you for something you didn't do, it hurts more than that. It goes beyond just being numb, shook. Because every waking moment, you think about it. And you don't sleep with it because you have to get up and figure out a way to make them realize you didn't do that. You're not that person. My brother would win a new trial. We were so happy. 1977, won a new trial. And they took the man back to court. And they summed him the exact same way. And they gave him the exact same sentence. And they brought him back and they gave him more drugs. And more drugs. And then in 1978, the Sandra Lockyer case came into effect in the Ohio Supreme Court, which was the ruling on constitutionality of death penalty. And we won that. And so they let us off death row. Everybody except my brother who is medicated. And his cell just happened to be right by mine on the way out. So, until, and this was 1978. So until November 14th, 2000. November 20th, 2014. I always carry that in my mind. Walking past my brother. And him saying, here. The worst thing that a lawyer for the state can do is hide evidence. Is lie and cheat to win a case. Prosecutorial misconduct is the worst thing that can happen. Because those guys are there to serve and protect. But they steal dreams. They take the interest. When I left, I was a baby. I'm the old person that thank you now. So I stand here today and tell you that I'm in that foolishness. And I will fight with you if you fight for yourself. Because the only way to win in a struggle that's against you is to fight back. Thank you so much for being here.